morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to a Media Matters special for Anfield Index. It's one of those ones, in truth, we never really wanted to be doing, but now that the news is broken, we've got to discuss it and we've got to get into it. So unless you've been living under a rock for the past 24 hours, you'll have all clocked the news about Trent Alexander-Arnold and his pending move on a free transfer to Real Madrid. So that's what we're going to get into. Who bears responsibility? How have we got to this situation? How do all the runners and riders play a part in this one? And to join me as ever, I've got the renowned and the respected David Lynch. And David, there's probably going to be disappointed if we're not reading out a few comments in the chat panel, blocking a few, but this one's understandable. It's an emotional topic. This is bad news, whichever way you dress it up.
Yeah, well, I wrote about it yesterday, and you can see on social media that there is a lot of anger and a lot of feelings about it. And it is, as you say, it's completely understandable. I mean, this is the primary feeling here is sadness and disappointment from my point of view, because, you know, it's a local lad has come through the academy, and, you know, you heard the quotes, hadn't you, so many years. Yeah. Been wanting to be captain and this, that, and the other, and he's clearly, you know, he's taking a decision that's for himself is to kind of turn his back on that, and it's a sad feeling. You didn't want this relationship to end. You always think, when, you know, a local lad from West Derby grew up within, you know, spitting distance of Melwood. Yeah. You just think they're going to be there for the entirety of the career, and those don't come along very often. The ones who are able to, you know, got the ability to play for Liverpool that long, and then if the local lads as well, it makes it extra special. So. Yeah, sadness and disappointment, really, that it's kind of turned out this way.
Yeah, it does feel like the inevitable's happened. It's almost been building this way to a while, and we were almost prepared ourselves for it, or many had, but that doesn't stop it being a bit sad, or it is what it is for many. But I do want to get into it specifically, and you're right, there's recriminations, there's accusations from many, and I understand this because it's an emotional topic and people will be saying who's to blame, how we got to this. So I do want to almost take it bit by bit. And this first one, and I know you've written about this specifically in your article and sort of tackled into the different players on this. It does make you think, and whether it's cynical or whatever, but on Trent's last contract renewal, it was 4 years, which isn't typical, if we're honest. It tends to be for a younger player, 5, maybe even 6 in that regard as well. Is there a bit of you now when you're looking at it thinking 4 years, was this part of the plan all along for Trent?
Yeah, I don't doubt it for a second. I mean, as a starting point, really, we've spoken about this contract and the possibility here for such a long time. And the reason I kind of was never able to preach any confidence about this one was on the basis, and we said it repeatedly, this one's going to be up to Trent. It's all about whether he wants to stay or not. He ultimately will make that decision or not. And obviously, so, you know, as much as we'll talk about the blame elsewhere and the situation and how it's come about, the primary reason this has happened is because Trent Alexander-Arnold would prefer to play for Real Madrid next season and in the coming season than play for Liverpool. So, you know, it's a really good starting point for blame in terms of, you know, that there's, if a player decides that, what really can you do? And you're right to talk about the contract. I think that's a massive thing. I mean, around that period, Virgil van Dijk signs a 5-year deal. I think Alisson signs a 6-year deal. Yeah. They've signed Nunez up to a 6-year deal when they initially signed him. So you see in the contract lengths that they would prefer, and they're certainly not 4 years. So it clearly, he signed that with this situation in mind, didn't he? That he would come to this point, and it, you know, it's not to say he decided all those years ago when he signed it that he wanted to go to Real Madrid. You know, you don't even know that interest is going to be there, or maybe with Barcelona, maybe not. Maybe his form would have fell off a cliff, and none of those clubs would have been involved. But his ideal situation when he signs that deal at 4 years in length is that he comes to this renewal, and the best scenario he could work out in his head, even if he wanted to stay, is to have Real Madrid battling for his services with Liverpool, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, whoever. Yeah, that's clearly something he kind of cooked up in his mind, is to put himself in this situation and give himself such an incredibly strong hand, which he did. I mean, unfortunately, he's given himself a strong hand, but that move to Real Madrid has ultimately proven too tempting, and he's actually wanted to go. So I guess it's just one of those where, he has engineered this situation and ultimately decided he wants to go. So, you know, we will go through how other people have played the part, but he kind of wanted this situation, and he's made the decision. And regardless of whether contracts have got out of hand or should have been dealt with it, blah blah blah, or all these different aspects that come into it, he could still have signed for Liverpool if he wanted to, and he hasn't. So in terms of I think the overall, it ultimately is Trent's decision to make, and he's made it.
Yeah, and the comments are starting to fly in. Yeah, Frosty Friedman saying the only person to blame is Trent. He is an adult, which is true, and he knows what he's done. Liverpool's made him who he is. And I suppose the three other elements around Trent, I mean, people will look back a little bit in what's happened in recent years, because you mentioned his interviews. I mean, he did that one, I think, was Alistair Campbell, where he said he couldn't imagine being anywhere else for Liverpool. But obviously, we know what's happening here. We also start thinking about how this has gone on, and we've heard that the club have made multiple bids and trying to negotiate. You're thinking, well, if he knew this all along, as he strung them along, you can see that reaction's coming out on social media. Has he engineered all this situation somewhat? And people even referencing his brother Tyler as his agent and whether this was his plan. You can, right or wrong in the merits of that, you can understand the furore around those points, can't you?
Yeah, exactly. I understand the kind of frustration around those aspects. But one thing I would say, and again, I think this is something we discussed on a pod a while ago, actually, is that, I said that I actually think the reason he's not come out in interviews and completely shut this down is because at the time I kind of believed that he would, he hadn't quite made his mind up. And I do think that's a possibility, by the way. I don't think, you're seeing people now suggesting, he decided on this move a long time ago. Etc. We can't know that for sure. That is very, very difficult to know. Like I say, I think he engineered this situation so he would have, this is what you're going to get at Real Madrid, this is what you're going to get at Liverpool, these are the two offers, have a think about that, and then make a real decision over that, and clearly has made his decision now. But I'm not so sure it was engineered in terms of, I'm going to go to Real Madrid and I want this move 18 months in advance and I'm going to run my contract down. I'm not sure it's quite that cynical, to be honest. So I don't personally really buy into that aspect of it, really. But I understand why people are frustrated that it's, it's felt like that, hasn't it? It's felt like Liverpool being strung along a little bit, and that's really frustrating. But I do wonder whether, could this move have been engineered in any other way, or in a way that wouldn't have really disappointed people? And if he had stopped to speak about his future, for example, more often this season, would he really have said anything that would have given anyone any great comfort, really, anyway? So it's just not a nice situation, is it? It's not one to be enjoyed, and unfortunate, and all those interviews and a part of it. And one thing I would say, I think maybe you could say from Trent, is particularly disappointing behaviour, actually, in terms of the things that I think should be laid at his door. I do recall us discussing his celebration at West Ham when he scores the goal. And I said at the time, do you know what? That gives me a little bit of confidence, actually, that he's going to stay at Liverpool, because I thought, no way is he going to antagonise the fans in that way and then go and leave for Real Madrid. And he has done that. So, he's absolutely, well, I say that I think he primarily is to blame for this situation, because it's his decision. But I do think aspects like that do tend to make it extra disappointing, and all the things he said in interviews, etc.
Yeah, and it does, like you say, when you start looking back in those moments, you just view things in a slightly different way. And it's interesting, this word I did want to use, that people are putting this in the chat panel. So thank you for all your comments. One there from MRG2510. Pity you could have gone down as an all-time LFC great, legacy ruined. I mean, he will have known this and the impact, what he's doing and what he's going to do would have. But this damages the legacy no matter how anyone dresses it up now, doesn't it?
Yeah, you just can't get away from that. I mean, I've seen people say, well, he won everything, and he did. And I don't go too far that way in terms of saying everything's trashed, he's absolutely nothing to Liverpool, because he is, at the end of the day, a big reason why, he came through the academy, he cost them nothing, and he was a wonderful world-class footballer for so many years. Helped them end the Premier League drought. He's going to get another one. Won a Champions League. Won the Club World Cup. Won everything it was possible to win. So I don't agree with this sort of suggestion that his legacy is, that's it now. He's completely finished. But it's not going to be as strong as it could have been. He's going to be nowhere near Steven Gerrard, and when he hangs his boots up in the end. He's not going to get, I suspect, a warm welcome if he ever comes back to Liverpool with Real Madrid. It's not going to be one of those. So. yeah, he's tarnished his legacy in terms of what it could have been and how big of a Liverpool legend he could have been had he stayed for much longer. But I still think there will be something there we can grasp onto and say, is a real positive in terms of what he gave Liverpool.
Yeah, it almost has the feeling that he'll be in that McManaman and maybe Owen category, as people put it. Maybe people look at those different, but yeah, we'll see what that brings. But ultimately, yeah, it is Trent that makes the call. I did want to ask you, though, about other elements, because I think these are important to say, because it's never just one simple thing. It's never as black and white as people make it out. And FSG are being referenced in this. People love to reference FSG in any essence, and I understand why. And I want to break them down almost into past and present. I know it sounds like a Muppets movie almost, but it's important. For the past, for things when Mike Gordon was maybe in charge, for the way the club was allowed to be run, does that element of FSG, the people who ultimately signed the checks, you'd say as well, did they have to take a share of blame for letting it get to this stage, do you think?
Yeah, undoubtedly. You wouldn't. Ideally, you would not be in a situation right now this summer where three best players are all coming out to the end of the contract. I mean, that it's a combination of players who are in that situation makes it all the more disastrous. Really, that is pretty incredible that it's got to that. So that's a real disappointment and is definitely on the owners. I think one thing I don't buy into is the idea it's about, oh, well, he's seen what the owners have got planned and they lack ambition or anything like that. I think that's complete and utter nonsense, to be honest, because at the end of the day, he's about to win a Premier League this season at an absolute canter. Liverpool were unfortunate not to go further in the Champions League. This is not like when Steven Gerrard could have left. It's not like when Steve McManaman did leave. It's not like when Owen left. This is a genuinely competitive team. The only one I've seen consistently competitive in my 36 years of life, by the way. So, you talk about ambition. This is as good as it's been for Liverpool for 3 decades. So, I don't really agree that that's kind of had anything to do with it, to be honest. So, I don't so much really buy into that one. But I think, the management of the club did kind of fall by the wayside for a little bit. There was the uncertainty around the sale, which definitely did not help when you had some key players coming to the end of the contracts. The backroom staff and the changes there were a massive factor in it as well. And ultimately, that all happened on the owner's watch. So they do deserve a share of the blame. But, I would stop short. Like I say, ultimately, we've got to remember that this is Trent's decision that he's made, and whether maybe FSG could have done things differently and would have convinced him. But I don't really buy into that. I think he's just decided he wants to join Real Madrid, and that's kind of that.
I suppose from that as well, where do you stand on the revised structures element? Because I've seen people saying, oh, Richard Hughes has done nothing. But obviously all the information that's come out is Julian Ward seems to be on the contracts. And so people will put sort of Edwards, Ward, Hughes together in that way. Do you think it's a case of they were just handed almost a poison chalice? They couldn't have done anything? Or do you think they will carry some blame in this?
Yeah, because I think surely by the point, like I said, I don't believe the idea he's been planning this for 2 years or anything like that. But I think by the time it gets to 12 months, gets to 6 months, once Richard Hughes has got his feet under the table, he probably has a pretty good idea that he wants to do this. So, how do you convince him otherwise? It's not a move, in my opinion, that's anything to do with money. I think he will earn more in Real Madrid, but I think it's more to do with the fact that he just wants to try it. He wants the lifestyle, training later in the day, the sunshine, all those aspects of it, speaking the language. It's fantastic. Madrid is an absolutely fabulous city, by the way. So if anyone wants me to go there and cover Madrid, I am absolutely up for that. So, it's all these other aspects. And so if it was just about money, you could go, well, why haven't they gone a bit higher? Why haven't they done more to convince this player?
Yeah.
He's a local lad. He's got all this importance. Why have they not done that? But I just don't think it is about, I don't think it is anything to do with money. And I don't think there's much more Richard Hughes could have done or Julian Ward to convince the player. I think they've put enough money on the table to him there, and it isn't enough because you can't, as good as playing for Liverpool is, you can't offer that lifestyle change, that one-off experience that he will not get to do for the rest of his life. So, he's got one shot at this, and he's wanted to take that one shot. So, I don't know what more they could have done really to convince him once his mind was made up.
It does seem pretty hard to lay any blame at the current incumbents, the people who negotiate that at the moment. And this is what I was thinking towards as you were saying it. And Red Armchair supporters put there. If they'd have known this and he's put it to come clean and said he was leaving, they'd have probably sold him last summer. Do you think if that was the case, if they got the tip of the nod to say, yeah, I am probably going to, do you think they would have pushed? And people will also reference I think it was a £20 million bid, wasn't it, in January as well? So do you think people will look at that as the current incumbents not doing anything at all?
What would people have preferred there for him to accept the January bid? I certainly wouldn't have. I'd rather not. I'd rather give up £20 million for a Premier League title, particularly as it's not my money. So I don't think it's going to make a big dent in reinvestment there. So for as much as this ownership's talked about as being money obsessed and this, that, and the other, they had a choice to make there in terms of they could have just sold him for £20 million and risked winning the Premier League title, and they didn't do that. So I think that's a positive. And I think that's probably true about, if he'd come to them last summer and said he wanted to go, they would have probably tried to broker a deal. The main question mark then would have been, would Real Madrid have been able to do it? Because they were signing Mbappe at the time, and although he came on a free, obviously the money that's associated with that deal will be absolutely outrageous. So did they have the headway to do that? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure, really. And this is another one that's been talked about a lot, really, is, could he have signed a contract extension and made sure Liverpool have got a fee of some sort?
Yeah, release clause.
I don't know if that's realistic to say that, because I just think, do Real Madrid, were they able to put together the package to buy him from Liverpool? And do you, as good as he is, as special as he is, as absolutely unique as he is as a player, he still plays at right back. There's a limit, I think, to just how influential he can be on your play and how much money you can plow into that. Can they really, if you decide to take a 2-year extension or whatever, just to make sure Liverpool got a fee, could Real Madrid have justified paying 80 million for him or something north of that? I just don't know. And so maybe he's thinking and they're thinking, the only way this move happens is if he runs his contract down and we can get him on a free transfer. And if that's the story that's being sold to you, but you want this move, you want the experience, then this is just how it's had to kind of play out. I think Liverpool might have pushed to sell him and he told them in the summer that he wanted to go, but whether they'd have been able to do that or not is a different matter, because of course that then comes into what did Real Madrid want and how would they have played it?
Yeah, absolutely. It is hard to say. And this is a bit of an aside, but it is linked to the current, which is what we want to talk about as well, more than anything. Helio Matteo saying there, the timing's horrible and cast a shadow over the last lap. Liverpool will be keen to make sure this doesn't derail anything, aren't they? They'll still be fully focused on the title. I suppose it links to, and you'll have experience from this, how will the club want to manage this in terms of leave the announcement till after the season, maybe leak stuff out a bit? People are asking those questions as well.
So on who leaked it, it's definitely come from the Real Madrid side. You can categorically say that. Nobody at Liverpool is talking about this. And I would disagree with the idea it casts a shadow over the Premier League title win that's coming. For me, I don't know. Maybe when I was a bit younger, I would have seen this completely differently. But you support Liverpool. You want Liverpool to succeed. The players just come and go for me, really. And the whole aim of the thing is for Liverpool to be successful. So I don't really agree it's going to cast a shadow. I think that party that happens in Liverpool is going to be absolutely crackers. I really don't buy into the idea it casts a shadow over it. But to go back to your kind of question on it, which was around...
the way the club would try and control the narrative.
Yes,
out there,
So in terms of that, I imagine, he's going to be out for a little while yet with his injury. I imagine the club would absolutely love to have the title wrapped up by the time that they confirmed it. If they can't stop it coming out before then, and it's essentially already confirmed now. They're finalising the details, aren't they? I think realistically, Liverpool would love to have the title wrapped up and then say, right, we'll make an announcement together. We're going to say this is your last 4 or 5 games or whatever's remaining at the point Liverpool wrap it up. I think that would be the ideal situation because they don't want the distraction for the players and the group from what they've got to get done, which is to go out there and win the title.
It does feel that way. They always say, bring the bad news in on the good news cycle and people will try and gloss over it a little bit. So you could well understand a little bit of them doing that and moving forward. And this one is important to discuss because Just to be clear, it says Jurgen Klopp to Bain, ? On the screen there. I adore Jurgen Klopp. He's absolutely one of my idols, a hero of mine beyond belief. But even your heroes can be fallible. And when you look at this in the cold light of day, and obviously we think of the situation just before Jurgen Klopp left the club, his power, we've talked about this on pods, was almost all-encompassing at the club. That dynamic had changed completely. And obviously people had speculated around what that meant for Michael Edwards in the past, etc. Jörg Schmadtke there was almost... I mean, he was brought in, we thought, as a sporting director, but I had to look this up in this morning just to check. Jurgen Klopp called him his transfer assistant in an interview, which probably said how it would change specifically. Is there a part of you thinking, and it's not being derogatory about a great man, but Jurgen Klopp maybe carries a point of this, have been part of letting them get to this stage with his power in the situation?
Yeah, so again, this kind of ties into where the ownership, again, deserve blame because they made the decision, they made the call to give him that extra power. So again, you look at, was that a wise decision? It's definitely played a role in what's transpired with this situation. So I don't think the ownership's hands are kind of clean on this one either. Which is, is that they made the call to give Jurgen Klopp more power, to put him in charge of all matters recruitment and the general direction of the club. And, the aftermath of that was to see Michael Edwards depart, to see Julian Ward have that role then for about 6 months and say, I don't want to do this because I don't really have any power here. So, once you do that and you don't have a sporting director in place who's overseeing the general health of the club in the long term, you get situations start to emerge like contracts getting closer and closer to expiring, your three best players being in one summer this close to expiry and therefore potentially leaving on a free transfer. And, Jörg Schmadtke shouldn't take any of the blame because it was obvious what his role was coming in. Yeah. Get this summer's transfer business done, help us rebuild our midfield, do the deals, and then you can go with everybody's best wishes. So, it was, why I still struggle to understand why was he so adamant that he needed more power? It was working really well as it was. Yeah. Why rip it up? I don't understand what the thinking was behind that. So, and it's caused it. It's been part of the reason this situation has come about. Like I said, you can't always go too far in that because obviously it's Trent's decision at the end of the day. And like I say, whether Jurgen hadn't took on more power, whether they had a consistent sporting director or not, maybe this would have happened anyway because Trent Alexander-Arnold wanted to join Real Madrid. But I do think it's worth mentioning as one of the factors in there. And I think FSG, as much as Jurgen himself, are to blame for the kind of madness that was happening behind the scenes in terms of the sporting director's office.
Yeah, it does seem a combination of events when we're trying to be nuanced on this, people, rather than just laying it directly at one person's door. And we can't mention Trent without mentioning the other two, because naturally people are looking on those and thinking, and you understand this, David, we've got to get those two done now. We've lost one. We've got to get those two done. There's no excuse. There is massive pressure on them to get these done now, it feels, doesn't it? And I know we've said it before, you can understand if people hammer them now if they don't get these two done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've spoke for a long while about the idea that 2 out of 3 kind of wouldn't be the worst outcome in the world. But now we know that one of those 3 is definitely going. Therefore, you have to get the next 2. You have to get these 2 signed up. It absolutely has to happen because, to lose Trent and his importance to the team, to then lose your other 2 most important players will be absolute madness. What it does as well, by the way, in terms of these contract negotiations, it strengthens Van Dijk and Salah's hands massively because they know that pressure exists as well. They also know Liverpool will have a little bit more money in the pot because they're not giving 300 grand a week to the right back. So these are all factors in it. But it puts a lot of pressure on getting those negotiations done and getting it all sorted out. So really interested to see if they're able to do that, and because they simply have to. I just, okay, this has added one more thing to the summer that they need to do, which was already probably going to be busy because of several positions that needed strengthening. And you can't allow for these 2 to go as well because it becomes a complete rebuild then. And there's absolutely no chance that Liverpool will be anywhere near the level they've shown this season if you lose Trent and then you throw in losing these two as well, because we're talking about literally three of the best players in the world, arguably the three best players in the world in their positions. You can't allow it to go 3 for 3. You can't even allow to just retain one. It's not enough. There's huge pressure on the owners and also the sporting director and all the staff around that to get these done now. There's just no excuses, I don't think.
And I know this is kind of a bad question to ask, but it's right, and it's probably not going to be a good answer. But this also doesn't bring that the other two are going to get done, because, as you said, in negotiations, Rami for Salah and Van Dijk's agent are going to say, well, hold on, you've just got about 250 grand a week more to play with. My clients are more valuable. And also that all the chips are on their side of the table. This Liverpool have got pressure, but it doesn't bring a quick resolution to the other two, does it?
No, but what I would say is that both have made quite clear they want to stay, and that is probably the main ingredient here that's really, really important. Because, I mean, look, like we said about Trent, at the end of the day, maybe all these mitigating circumstances we're talking about, Jurgen Klopp's role, how that changed, the ownership, what they could have done around it, it just come down to ultimately that he wanted to go in the end. So, the key factor here is with Van Dijk and Salah, they have made it really abundantly clear that they both want to stay. So that's a really important ingredient here that Liverpool can use and make the most of. You've got two players absolutely desperate to extend the stays at Anfield, and so you've got to go and make the most of it and get it sorted out. And we're talking about a quick resolution. It has to be a quick resolution, because June is around the corner and they'll be out of contract. Yeah. So it actually has to be quick. We don't have a lot of time to play with. But both players, unlike Trent, both players have absolutely said that they're desperate to stay and desperate to be part of this. And so that, in theory, makes it a little bit easier for Liverpool.
And do you think, I suppose the final one I want to ask on this for the other two, we talk about data-led decisions, and that's what, we're coming back into, the sort of the scientific, the analysis, quite, which has served us well. In that essence, is there a bit for you thinking, well, if you want to replace Trent, you can't find other Trents. You've got to get like 3 players, replace him in the aggregate, as they say. That if you then take out Van Dijk and Salah, you're going to have to get 9 players in to replace them in the aggregate type of thing. So the total cost of that against losing. Do you think just that data element will see it, even if they wouldn't want to pay this, them think, now we need to get these done, even if we pay more than we necessarily want to?
One of the big things they'll know about as well is that turnover will lead to ups and downs in terms of performance. You look at Chelsea, the amount of players that they brought in and sold over the last few years, they just can't find any consistency whatsoever. That generally when there is a huge turnover of players, it causes you problems. So that will be something you can measure in data. So that, for me, more than anything, will be the thing that will drive Liverpool. Even, as you say, there might be some reluctance to go to certain figures or whatever, but I think they might be much more willing to compromise now, Liverpool, because they know, like I say, you're already losing one of your starters. So the first game of the next Premier League season, Trent is already not going to be there. You'd say the same for probably Nunez as well, isn't going to be there if you can't count him as a starter up front. So, again, you're already starting with some turnover there in your team. Ideally, you want your left back to be slightly different as well. So we're talking about 3 positions changing there. Imagine you start turning that into 4, into 5. There's no way Liverpool make a good start to the season if that is the case, because the relationships aren't there. They need to work together. So I think Liverpool will want to just keep that turnover to a minimum. They want to know going into next season, the very first game of it, Virgil van Dijk's going to be our centre-half. We've got Mo Salah at right wing. And then, of course, maybe a couple of signings sprinkled in there. But they don't want that turnover. So that's going to be an absolutely... that's going to be a massive part, I think, of making sure they get it done. And there is also that external media pressure as well from fans, from the media, of just, can you really justify trying to letting all 3 of these players go in one summer? I think that pressure will slightly tell on them. As much as they are very good at blocking out the external noise, this is too much for them to allow, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree with that. We'll have to see what develops. And Ethan Chadwick puts there, we just need VVD and Mo to stay now. We need something good news. Believe me, Ethan, there's nothing more I'd be doing or happier doing a pod with David talking about 2 superstars, 2 elite players talking and staying. We didn't want to be talking about a player leaving, but that's where we are with Trent Alexander-Arnold. Liverpool have now got the unenviable task of replacing him and looking at what they can do in the future. But we'll have to see any further updates on contracts, which we pray are more positives. All it leaves me to say as ever is, we didn't want to do this, David, but for your time, your insight, are answering all the questions honestly. A few crackpots in the chat panel, which is always interesting. It is much appreciated.
No, thanks for having me. And yeah, hopefully we're not doing these ones for Mo Salah and Van Dijk as well, because there's absolutely no way justifying that one.
No, none at all. But ladies and gents, that was another Media Matters for Anfield Index.